An ancient skull uncovered decades ago in China has recently been revealed to be a close human relative, closer even, in fact, than Neanderthals. It's called Dragon Man, and based on trace uranium inside the skull bones, it's been dated to at least 146,000 years old, but it may be even older than that. Now, this puts it at a very critical time period in human evolution when our ancestors were first emerging in Africa. But there's some disagreement about whether the fossil is from an entirely new species or is linked to other sets of fossils also found in East Asia. Paleoanthropologist John Hawkes, who wasn't himself involved in the research but has been taking a look at the results for us, thinks the latter. He told Phil Sansom the remarkable story of its discovery.
In 1933, a Chinese worker who was working on a bridge in Harbin found a skull. And the story is that it was actually given to a friend of this person, and the friend hid it away, hid it in a well. And it was hidden for more than 80 years. And on his deathbed, the story goes, he told his grandchildren, yeah, there's this skull in the well. It's important. You should do something about it, right? And so the grandchildren found the skull, they donated it to the museum, and the scientific analysis began at that time.
And it must have looked pretty unique for them to realize this is something that is worth hiding, right?
Yeah, anybody who maybe has seen a skull before would notice that this is different from the ones that they've seen. It's got this huge brow ridge. It's really big, right? If you just hold it next to your skull, it is bigger than your head is. And it's got this really large jaw and a big tooth in it. All of these things combined to say you would notice that this is something special.
So is this definitely not an early human skull? This is from something different.
It's as different from your skull or my skull as a Neanderthal skull is, but in a little bit of a different direction. And if you put it into a tree and say, how's this connected? It looks like it's about as different from modern humans as Neanderthals are.
They're calling him, I think, am I right, Homo longi, which is kind of, sort of, translates to Dragon Man, which is a very cool name.
Yeah, this name, Homo longi, is to me one of the greatest names that anybody's ever come up with for human origins, right? It's rooted within China. It's the kind of name that I sort of love.
By the way, is it definitely a man? Because they've called it Dragon Man, but do we know that for sure?
We don't look at past populations as if they're just men anymore, right? We know that they're men and women. With this particular skull, it's pretty big, right? And if you looked at its large size, you probably say this is probably a male. It could be a female, right? I can't rule that out. The problem is it probably is actually in the same, group as one of these other skulls, the Dali skull. And so then it's got a name, Homo daliensis. And that's a terrible name. And this
Right, so you're saying an example of this has already been found before, and someone's already given it a species name, and so it's got to be that species name because they got there first.
Yeah, taxonomy is this obscure sort of thing, right? That has these rules. And in this case, a name was given to this skull, Dali, and it was Homo daliensis. And the profile of the two skulls looks really similar. The analysis in this new research on the Harbin skull finds that they are really close to each other. So, I really think that they're probably the same group. What's fascinating about being in the same group is that it makes it a lot stronger case that that's going to match the genetics that tells us that there was a population there that we know of as the Denisovans. So we have no ancient DNA from this skull or from any of the other Chinese material yet that's of this age. We might not ever find the DNA from them, but we do know from DNA of later material that there was this group, the Denisovans. We know that they're pretty different from Neanderthals, and so we think that they were their own thing. So there's a good hypothesis here that Denisovans should be this Chinese population. If there is just one Chinese population, that helps because it says, we're probably looking at the same thing here.
Now, that is a fascinating story, and the team are understandably nervous about drilling into that skull to get the DNA out, but who knows, the mystery might soon be solved. That was John Hawkes, who was describing research from Shijun Ni that was published in the journal Innovation.